Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of all key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of data protection. As more and more social and economic activities take place online, the importance of privacy and data protection is being increasingly recognized. According to United Nations report on Roadmap for Digital Cooperation 2020, more than 7,000 data breaches were recorded in 2019, exposing more than 15 billion records. As per estimates, the potential cost of worldwide data breaches will be more than 5 trillion by 2024. Data privacy or information privacy is a part of the data protection area that deals with the proper handling of data, focusing on compliance with data protection regulations. It is centered around how data should be collected, stored, managed and shared with any third party, as well as compliance with the applicable privacy laws. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, 128 out of 194 countries have put in place legislations to secure the protection of data and privacy. In India, Personal Data Protection Bill seeking to provide for the protection of personal data of individuals and establish a data protection authority for the same was brought in Parliament in 2019 and was later referred to the Joint Committee for further scrutiny. Now, the JPC examining the bill has now been given an extension till the last week of the ongoing winter session of the Parliament to submit its report. Today, we're going to understand all aspects of data protection, also not only the Indian scenario, but the global scenario as well. What are the kind of laws which have been put in place by various countries and where do we stand? And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you. Beginning with, we have with us in the studio Advocate Khushbu Jain, a cyber law expert, joining us here. Welcome, Khushbu. We're also joined by Mr. Abhishek Singh, CEO of NEGD, that is National E-Governance Division from the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology with the Government of India. And Professor Huzur Sharan is also joining us from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering from IIT Delhi. Welcome, both of you gentlemen, to Sansad TV. Let me begin with you, Khushbu, and let's first start by understanding the concept of data protection only. We'll take it further as to why it is required. But for our viewers to understand it much better, what is data protection? What is data privacy? Why are we talking about it time and time again for quite a few years now?
See, there is no denial that data has become a very valuable asset. More so that if it's used in a different manner, it can have a very negative impact. Now, to understand that why do we need data protection right now, we had data privacy. Right to privacy was included as one of your fundamental rights by Supreme Court in via K. Puttoswamy judgment. Then came the 9 principles of privacy. But those 9 principles, how do you implement them became a problem. You know, exactly how one has a right, for them to bring it in a structure became a problem, is where we were thinking about there should be a need for a Data Protection Act, wherein certain aspects, whereas users are concerned, are taken care of. To an extent, if I just talk about few principles which I'm talking about, that is consent, that is notice, that is, correction, that is limitation of what kind of data you can, the purpose of taking the data, plus there should be an option of right to be forgotten. There should be an option whether I want to be, the subject of yours, whether I want my data to be processed. Another aspect comes is data localization, which has to be looked into, but that's for the maybe much later episode. But looking at all these scenarios, we have seen that collection of data, any of your data which goes in a wrong hand, has a potential to be misused. If we see all the cyber crimes in recent times are because they have access to your data.
Okay.
So that's one of the aspects. Another aspect comes whereas businesses are concerned, any business having excess of data or excess of information will have an upper edge compared to other businesses. That's where the need comes that, yes, data is being traded. If it's a non-personal data which has to be traded via my consent, then let there be a parallel, let there be a equal situation for everybody.
Okay. So clearly it's a very, important and complex process and issue. Can't be just, looked at in a binary segment out there when we're talking about data protection or data privacy. Professor Saran, I'd like to bring you in here. And, the same question in a different mode, if we have to understand it from a technical point of view also. why data becomes so important, and it's very easily available for everybody to see a lot of things. We do engage in a lot of social platform activities as well, and time and again users or the consumers have been warned and pointed that they should be very mindful of what they are agreeing to or what they're not agreeing to.
So, as you said very rightly, that many times, even like because of the European regulation, as many of you may be aware, the European Union in 2018 adopted a data protection law, one of the most stringent ones, called GDPR. And because of that, in fact, most platform providers have allowed you consent. Whenever you log into a new site or go to a new site, you'll normally see a page at the bottom saying accept cookies or not, choose your cookie preferences. But the flip side of that is, for almost anybody to be able to understand what all is being asked of you, see the cookie preferences, what is it?
Exactly.
Well, it's some data that the site is keeping about you so that it can serve you better. If you log into a website and later you come back again, they should be able to remember you. That's why they use these things called cookies. But they can also use that to track you across where all did you go, what all did you buy. So it's a sort of two-edged sword. And as a consumer, really understanding all of that is not something that should be expected from you, right? And that's where the challenge is. So they ask you to accept and you end up accepting. That's all it happens. Every time you download an app on any of your phones, it will again ask you for all sorts of permissions to be granted. And the default behavior for even the most tech-savvy people is to just say accept all, because it's just too much effort to understand the full complexity. And that for an average user is not something that they would be comfortable doing. So that's what is happening. Though in some sense you have consent, but it is not informed consent really, because the user doesn't even understand how his data is being used.
Okay. Mr. Singh, Professor Saran mentioned about the EU law vis-a-vis data privacy, and I also earlier mentioned the United Nations data, where around 128 countries have put in place legislations vis-a-vis data protection. The question I have to you is, where do we stand in India, on the issue of data protection laws? We understand there is a JPC which is looking into the data protection law. The report will be submitted soon. But apart from the proposed legislations, what are the key elements which we have right now in terms of the legal infrastructure vis-a-vis data protection?
As you already mentioned, India is also the draft PDP bill is in the public domain, and it has been deliberated for a very long time. And the JPC is also looking into it. So the broad principles of privacy and data security has been agreed to by India also. And if you go by the parameters, then the whole thing is defined by the Puttaswamy judgment on the data privacy, which clearly says that only as much data, data that is shared or data that is taken from anyone, should be minimal, should be justified, and should be commensurate should be proportionate to the purpose for which it is taken. So in that regard, any data protection legislation or data protection regime that we are setting up is also in line with the global principles, which include the key principles of ensuring fairness, ensuring lawlessness, ensuring transparency, ensuring accountability, building in the purpose limitation, providing the scope for minimal data collection, and the whole thing about ensuring integrity and confidentiality. So if the government is offering a service, then for that, if you require any data, then the data is taken only for that purpose.
Okay.
And that is spelled out in the UID Aadhaar Act also. And to offer a service, consent is taken. It's a consent-based architecture, and then data is used for offering a service, and then it's not shared to anyone who is not authorized to do that.
Okay.
So that's the broad principle, and that's what will be ultimately be part of the data privacy bill. That's what one expects. Yeah.
Okay. And what about the issue of data localization, as Khushbu was mentioning earlier? How do we take care of that aspect? Because that becomes really important with most of these social media giants or other big tech companies based outside India.
See, data localization, I think that debate is more or less settled. India has taken its policy about data localization. So all companies who are offering any service, they are setting up data centers in India, and ultimately we'll have to ensure the compliance with the legislation that comes in. So if the law requires that any personal data or any data of any individual which is taken by any company has to be stored in India, then that's the law. That will have to be done. And given the investments that I'm seeing, because all social media, when it comes to social media and when it comes to tech platforms, India is the biggest market. So I'm seeing a lot of investment in data centers and cloud infrastructure by almost all all the tech majors, and we should be, and that would ultimately result in all data of Indians being stored within India only.
Okay, okay. Khushbu, does that take care of the issue of data localization, which you were earlier referring to? And also, in terms of the mechanism which is being talked about, the proposed legislations, the key pillars, as Mr. Singh pointed out, are those the ones which we should be focusing on?
See, absolutely. So let me go on the second aspect of your question, which is what exactly are we looking out for, whereas data protection bill is concerned. So one major aspect which I want to focus on is right to be forgotten. You know, because that's in principle a part of your right to privacy. If I don't have a right to be forgotten, how do you have right to privacy over there? Something which has already been gone. Maybe today I want to. Let's take an example of Californian law, where it is very clearly imbibed that anybody, any citizen who is 18 years and below the age has posted anywhere, any social media or any other places, have a right to seek that data once they attain 18 and can request that I want this data to be deleted from wherever and however multiplication of that data has been done. A.
Okay.
Can we expect that kind of a right to be forgotten whereas India is concerned? A. B. How are we implementing it? Today we are not aware how many data of ours have been gone. We are one of the largest data generation country. How are we going to impose something which has already gone? Where all it has gone? For what purpose it has been used? Another aspect that comes, recently Facebook has put in a statement that we are getting away with facial recognition option. How did they had facial recognition option?
Yeah, that's what my question is. Did they have facial recognition
Absolutely,
option?
they had. So they nicely said that, oh, we are not doing that anymore. But what happens is the bill gonna take care of the aspect that something which has already gone with, can I take the consent back of, something which has already been given? So that and how that will be implemented is the aspect. Now, another aspect, I think, Abhishek ji was talking about that we do have a limitation purpose and the purpose for which the data has been taken. And sir was talking about that we never had an option to, to say no, option to opt out. So option to opt out is another good thing, because when businesses say, one is, let's take an example of Uber. Uber wants to give you services, they need to have your location. So there's a nexus to that data. They have to have your location. But if it's asking access to your, let's say, camera, to your photos, to your mic, you don't want to give that, so they cannot deny services to you. That's
exactly my question, because this is something which all of us face, and I'll take it later on to Professor Saran as well. In terms of the point which you made, the applications, the mobile apps, or these service platforms asking information from you which might not be relevant. For example, there might be several apps on my mobile phone here which I would have downloaded, and they would be asking for permission to the media on my phone, the phone, the pictures, the videos, which is not required for that particular app to function.
Absolutely. So one is that you want to. See, okay, let's go back. One is that you want to give your data. Second is you don't want to. So if that information is not related to the services that app is offering you, they have to provide you services equivalent to what it has been provided to somebody who has taken. They cannot take away the services. It has to be in the same level, A.
Which is not the case right now.
Which is not the case right now. B, to an extent, they have come up with the opt-out option because GDPR was implemented and company had to look into it. So they have come up. Now, if you see, you have an option of, but by default, when you download an app, everything is tick, tick, tick.
Tick, tick, yes.
Now, the second aspect which we were talking about, that what happens if they take your data. So if you look into privacy, basically data protection bill, whatever the state which we saw after Justice Sri Krishna's report and the bill which was drafted, segregates the data into 3 categories. Now, looking at the kind of data they are, the harm it can cause to the user is the kind of consent or the mechanism we are putting into, and also I think the same is reflected in your localization norms which we saw in the bill, if it's coming in the same form, Abhishek ji. So looking at personal category, personal data, then your sensitive data, then your critical data. So if it's your personal data, absolutely fine. If it's your sensitive data, any time, or critical data, any time, if you're sharing your data as a fiduciary, you're sharing my data with any third party, you have to take a consent. You cannot take it, you have to inform me that it has been taken for purpose A. In case you use it for purpose B or C, you have to again take an explicit consent from me. So all these things have to form part of the data protection, and that's how the protection would be there. Okay. Coming to your localization, I think I can come later after your question.
Definitely. We'll come to that, because since we are on this point, I'll take this to Professor Saran. Professor Saran, you were earlier pointing out that, how a common user cannot be expected to understand the intricacies of all the consents which are given, or which are technically required for him or her to, utilize that service which is being provided by that particular service provider, be it a mobile app or a social media platform, or a e-commerce website also. So if we have to understand the infrastructure which is to be put in place, it's also will have to, in addition to, making the consumers aware, we will also have to empower them.
I agree. In fact, you see, the point is, when you walk into a shop, see, today even shops have cameras on them, right? We see, for their own protection, they've implemented.
Yeah, the
right?
CCTV.
And so many other things. So your privacy everywhere is compromised. You are driving on the road and there is crossing, there is a traffic camera there, which is there for a genuine purpose, but it is recording all activity there. Now, where and how that data will be shared it's not even defined, sometimes. So I think all I'm trying to say is this data protection bill is a very good step. But I think this is an area with very much subtleties involved. Mm-hmm. It is not an area which can in one fell bill be completely resolved.
Okay.
No. The problems are very subtle. Like, there's this whole part, So as Khushbuji was saying, there's this business of all the Ola and Uber and all of these are keeping track of your data while they're picking you up and dropping you off and all that, which is very important and sensitive data. Now, if you are planning where to put a flyover in the city, maybe this traffic data is very useful to you. But you don't need individual data, you need aggregated data. So there is even a provision there where you can aggregate the data, depersonalize it, what is called anonymization, mm-hmm. and then it can be shared.
Okay.
Right? So this is a very important feature, and this is very important. Any service you design, if you are TRAI, you're trying to find out which parts of the country are not properly covered. Call drop per location. Everybody is call drop and all that. If you can collect that, aggregate it by hiding individual information, but having an aggregate picture, you can find which parts of your country are better covered, which are not.
Okay.
Right? So many things, and then that can lead to public policy decisions, right? Investment decisions, whatever it is. So it is important to have that data because it increases efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. Similarly, even when they're trying to sell you stuff, enterprises keep sharing each other data. That is happening. They try to share it in a depersonalized manner again. Okay. So the issue is, when you depersonalize, do you truly depersonalize? There's a huge challenge about depersonalizing.
Okay.
So all I'm trying to say is that this area is a very rich area. Lot of guidance has to be given, and guidance has to evolve with time.
Okay.
As in this bill, there is a data protection authority. It's just like SEBI is a very big regulator on stock market. Every day new regulations have to keep coming.
Indeed. It's an evolving process. That's what you're pointing out, Professor Saran. Right. Mr. Singh, would you agree there that we are venturing into this, and obviously with the way the technology is improving day by day, and our usage of that tech and a consumption of data is also increasing, we will have to evolve accordingly in terms of the data protection mechanism or the privacy mechanism which we put in place now, or perhaps a month later. But they'll have to keep on evolving, because there are a lot of aspects which we might not be thinking of right now, but might become really important, perhaps even 3 months down the line.
Fully agree with what Mr. Saran said and what Khushbu mentioned. At the same time, we need to kind of realize that all these tech platforms that we are using so freely without any charge is ultimately we are using it for certain benefits. Mm-hmm. So when I go to a platform like, say, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and I am using it without any charge, but I am getting some value from there because I'm getting connected to my people, to my friends. I'm getting to know about what they are doing, and I'm getting some intangible benefit out of that. So anybody who is offering that service is not offering it free. There is some way it will charge you. And
Indeed, there
how
are
will
no
you
free
charge you?
lunches.
There are no free lunches. So, and since he is running such a platform requires huge amount of investment, they will have to monetize it somewhere. And what can they monetize you? They can only monetize the data that they are getting from you. And then they will target advertisements there. So there, when we are there are some people who may say that I'm okay to get advertisements as long as they are suiting what I want to buy. It saves me time from scouting through different sources. So that's fair. But then this consent with regard to what data of what person any platform is taking has to be free in the sense that without any coercion. Number two, prior, it has to be done beforehand and informed. Okay, like people should be told that yes, you are selling, you are sharing this data, you are sharing the location data, what it might mean, where it will be used, how it will be abused. So we require a very good regulatory framework in order to ensure that the laws that we are trying to make for data protection are actually implemented in spirit and in practice. So what will happen is that just having a regulation will not serve. How do we make people aware of the pitfalls that are there? Because many people download apps, download solutions without realizing that what harm it may cause you. And if somebody has said that, like if there is no
Okay.
cost to a product, then you are the product. Your data and your information becomes something which is valuable for a company, and they use it for generating revenues.
Okay.
So that awareness is very, very essential, not only for the regulators, the government, but for every citizen who is using these kind of services.
Okay. Okay. So what you're saying is that when we're talking about data protection, we will have to look at both aspects, not only just consumer empowerment, but also consumer awareness there. But coming back to one aspect, which you wanted to talk about in terms of the issue of data localization, as Mr. Singh was earlier referring to, that this is being taken care of, and with obviously India being a very huge market for these companies, they would not want to let go of that big market just because of one aspect. And that localization of data or having data centers here itself is a policy which eventually they will have to follow.
So I need a clarity over, are we talking about sensitive, personal, critical, entire data have to be within the jurisdiction of India and it cannot have any copies outside, it will not travel at all, A. If not so, looking at the kind of data, if we are talking about personal data, one copy can be in India, which was being, discussed last, that one copy can be in India and a copy can go to other states. Now, in that scenario, see, imagine the situation, the power of localization. I'll just take 2 minutes. Let me just put 2 points.
Please.
Data localization, makes it vulnerable. A user data can be vulnerable for surveillance by any other state, by any other antisocial entity, by other state. Now, if I talk about other state per se, let's say any other state, I mean, it's practically true. If any other state has your data, it would be easy for them to access that data to put surveillance over it. B, the part when I talk about that, law enforcement agencies, the moment they want to execute something. So if you're keeping all the copies in India, I understand that law enforcement will not have a, difficult time in executing any kind of matters. And the third aspect that comes, whereas data localization is concerned, imagine the country which has very, very weak data protection norms. Now your data is saved over there, though it's a copy. If it's a copy, your data is saved over there, be it personal data, sensitive data, whatever the data we are talking about. If it is saved in a country where data protection norms are very weak, you're bound to be, vulnerable. I mean, your data is gone there. Okay. However strict norms you bring in India.
Okay.
That's about it. So I really want the understanding about the part that are we talking about complete localization, that none of the data will travel outside India is where the purpose can be solved. But looking at the businesses, looking at the kind of bilateral treaties we have, I think that would not be the feasible aspect.
Okay. Before we bring this to an end, discussion, let's quickly take this to Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, that's a very important aspect which Khushbu is pointing out in terms of when we're talking about dealing with the issue of data localization. How will it be dealt with? At which category? Will we have, option A, option B, or option C, as Khushbu pointed?
There will be multiple. The final bill is yet to be seen, but the broad principles of data privacy and data localization will be ensured in the sense that if the government is coming up with a regulation which says that that personal data has to be protected and it will be subject to Indian laws as the parliament legislates,
Okay.
then the obvious consequence of that is that that can only happen when the data is actually stored within India. So there will be a structure. How it will come, we will wait to see.
Indeed.
But it will come in the sense that the personal data of all Indians will have to be stored in India in order to offer services. And if there is any other possibility, then there will be ways. Like if consent is taken,
Okay.
if for some purpose, if you are applying for a service which is delivered from outside only, suppose you are applying for a visa which is processed there, then some data will have to flow there. So there will be specific cases in which there will be ways to do that. But then again, wherever such a thing is done, there will be process for that.
Okay.
And for doing so, a consent of the citizen will always be taken.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Mr. Abhishek Singh, Professor Saran and Khushbu as well for sharing your views and insights. As our experts were pointing out, various aspects when we're talking about the issue of data protection or data privacy. A bill is already in the works. It is being examined by the Joint Parliamentary Committee. And as Mr. Abhishek Singh pointed out, let's wait and watch as to what the JPC report says and what's the final version of that particular bill, which eventually will be passed by the Parliament. We'll come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.